Washington DC, the capital of the United States, anchors the fourth largest metro area in the country along with nearby Baltimore, Maryland. Nearly 10 million people live in this region, spanning 4 states and a federal district, making it about the same size as the Chicago metropolitan area. 3 major airports serve the DC and Baltimore area: Dulles, Reagan National, and BWI Marshall. Like my previous airport comparisons, let's quickly talk about the history, statistics, and more for each airport and see how they stack up against each other. First, let's go over the actual locations of these 3 airports. They're pretty evenly spaced out across the metro area, though none of them are actually in DC or Baltimore. Dulles is found in the state of Virginia, among the western suburbs of DC. Reagan is found just across the Potomac River from DC in the city of Arlington, Virginia, which is a relatively central location for the area. Lastly, BWI is found much closer to Baltimore in Anne Arundel County in the state of Maryland. Next, let's briefly talk about the history of each airport. The oldest of the 3 is Reagan National, which opened to the public on June 16, 1941 with the name Washington National Airport, after a couple decades of studies and planning to create the DC area's first modern airport. As the first such airport in the area, it was the main air travel hub, and by the 1950s it offered non-stop flights to the West Coast. However, as other, even larger airports opened nearby, a federally enforced perimeter rule was created in 1966 to keep the airport short-haul and transfer longer flights to the new Dulles Airport. Currently, this perimeter rule prevents flights from exceeding 1,250 miles, but there are quite a few exceptions. Additionally, given the airport's proximity to highly important government and military operations, strict flight patterns and noise restrictions are also in place. In 1998, the airport was renamed after President Ronald Reagan. Up in Maryland, BWI Marshall was dedicated by President Truman on June 24, 1950, after similar planning by government agencies for a new facility to serve the Baltimore area. It was first called Friendship International Airport, after the name of a Methodist church and its land, which was purchased and raised for the airport. Originally intended as just a Baltimore area airport, as the suburbs of both cities began to merge, the airport was renamed Baltimore Washington International Airport in 1973 to draw in customers from the DC area. However, for a brief period in the late 50s and early 60s, the airport was already DC's jet airport hub, as National didn't allow early jetliners, and Dulles was not yet opened. In 2005, Thurgood Marshall, the first black Supreme Court justice and a Baltimore native, was added to the airport's name. Lastly, Dulles Airport is the newest of the 3, opening on November 17, 1962. Plans for this second DC area airport began in the late 1940s, and by 1958, President Eisenhower selected its location in the far western Virginia suburbs. Its construction demolished a primarily African-American community called Willard, as well as a largely unknown airport called Blue Ridge Airport, which apparently had grass runways and became defunct by the mid-50s. Dulles had a slow start as an airport, with aircraft operations at National far exceeding those at Dulles. However, following the creation of National's perimeter rule in '66 and the introduction of jetliners to the airport, numbers began to increase. Today, Dulles is home to about 90% of international travel across all 3 airports. Speaking of the modern day, the 3 airports all fill certain roles within the DC-Baltimore area's air travel industry. As previously mentioned, Dulles is the main airport for longer domestic flights and nearly all international flights. Reagan National is more of a regional flight hub. Both of these airports are the main DC airports, while BWI is Baltimore's main airport and fills many of the needs for that market. Today, the airports are all strikingly similar in terms of the number of passengers served. I'll be using 2019 data for this, since passenger numbers were far lower in 2020 due to a certain virus. BWI Marshall was the busiest of the 3 airports that year, serving 26,993,896 total passengers. Not far behind was Dulles, which saw 24,817,677 total passengers that year. Even closer still was Reagan National, which is in last place of the 3 airports, but still handled 23,945,527 passengers in total. These 2019 numbers made the 3 airports the 22nd, 25th, and 26th busiest airports in the country, respectively. BWI Marshall lists 18 different passenger airlines that fly with the airport on their website. Its largest airline is by far Southwest, making up about 2/3 of all flights there. The airport is a focus city for Southwest Airlines. The busiest domestic flights out of BWI are to Atlanta, Orlando, and Fort Lauderdale. As of 2019, the airport only offered flights to 13 international destinations found in the Caribbean, Latin America, Canada, and Europe. Dulles flies with 36 passenger airlines according to their website, mainly due to its status as the international flight hub for the region. United Airlines has a hub at Dulles, and they account for about 2/3 of the market share there. Some of the busiest domestic flights in 2020 included Denver, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Internationally, the busiest flight in 2017 was to London Heathrow. Lastly, Reagan National has just 8 passenger airlines listed online, all of them being pretty big-name North American airlines. American Airlines has a hub at National, and they usually make up a solid 25 to 50% share of the market. Top destinations out of National included Atlanta, Chicago O'Hare, and Dallas in 2020. There are very few international destinations offered by National. Air Canada Express flies to a few Canadian cities, and a couple of airlines offer flights to Nassau in the Bahamas. So now that we know all this information, how do we actually get to each airport? In terms of public transportation, Reagan is arguably the most easily accessible of the 3 airports. The Washington Metro Yellow and Blue lines have a stop at Reagan, and the Washington Metro is a comprehensive subway system serving DC and its suburbs in Virginia and Maryland. For road transport, the George Washington Memorial Parkway passes by the airport, and US Highway 1 is not far away either. BWI Marshall is also pretty well connected to public transit. It has a stop on the Baltimore Light Rail Link that runs from the south suburbs through Baltimore and into the north suburbs. Interstate 195 also goes directly to the airport for those traveling by road. Lastly, Dulles is not yet connected to the Washington Metro, although the Silver Line extension project will change that. The Dulles stop and several other new stations in Western Virginia have been under construction for a few years, and currently it's expected to open in early 2022. For now though, traveling by road is the easiest way to get to Dulles, and the toll highway Virginia State Route 267 runs straight to it. Like the last 2 airport videos, these 3 airports are unfortunately no exceptions to deadly aviation incidents. Baltimore probably has the most intriguing story of the 3, and thankfully no incident involving BWI has ever killed more than a few people. On February 22, 1974, a man entered the airport, shot and killed an aviation officer, and then boarded Delta Flight 523, proceeding to kill the first officer and badly injure the captain. This guy intended to hijack the plane and crash it into the White House to kill President Richard Nixon. Police shot him from outside the plane first though, and he then killed himself. Reagan National has unfortunately experienced some more devastating accidents. The worst of these took place on January 13, 1982. Air Florida Flight 90 waited on the taxiway for nearly an hour due to a bad winter storm, which covered the aircraft with snow and ice. After takeoff, the plane could not climb in altitude and crashed into the 14th Street Bridge and then the Potomac River below, killing 4 drivers and 74 people on the plane. Thankfully though, heroic bystanders were able to help save the lives of 5 people on board. Unfortunately, Dulles Airport was involved in the 9/11 terrorist attacks. American Airlines Flight 77 departed from Dulles en route to Los Angeles, but was hijacked and flown into the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. All 64 people on the flight were killed, along with 125 in the Pentagon, a tragic event part of the deadliest terrorist attack in human history. To finish off the video, let's talk about the future of these airports. At BWI Marshall, there are currently 3 runways and 5 concourses. A renovation and expansion of Concourse A started in 2018 to accommodate the growth of Southwest Airlines. The cost of this project is about $60 million and is adding 5 gates to the concourse. As I mentioned a bit earlier, Dulles is going to be connected to the Washington Metro Silver Line early next year. Today, the airport has 4 runways, a main terminal, plus 2 midfield terminals home to 2 concourses each. The Silver Line extension is arguably the largest project happening at Dulles currently. A 5th runway has been planned for some time now, and another notable planned project is a new terminal building to replace the one home to concourses C and D currently. However, there are no set plans for these projects yet. Lastly, Reagan National has 3 runways and 4 concourses currently, but that's about to change very soon after this video is published. A billion-dollar project to add a 5th concourse, Terminal D, began in 2018. This added 14 gates to the airport and replaced the infamous Gate 35X, where passengers waited for shuttle buses to take them to their planes. Terminal D is set to open on April 20th this year. And that's all for this quick comparison of the DC and Baltimore area's airports. Thank you for watching this video as always. If you enjoyed, make sure to check out my other similar videos and subscribe for more weekly geography content. I'll see you next week.